week 2 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 12 defense DST units. I'm ranking number 1, the New York Jets. Just last week had a tough outing week 1 at the San Francisco 49ers with Jordan Mason ran amok. On them was the backup running back, but I still thought the Jets did a few things decent. The passing game, they didn't do much with San Francisco. Obviously, their offensive line is great, led by Trent Williams after he ended the holdout at the end of training camp, and they just got so many weapons with that 49er team. But this week, a great matchup at the Tennessee Titans where there's not much going, and Will Levis in week 1 was a turnover machine, and the Bears really exploited him. So this week with a good matchup at Tennessee, and they're a turnover machine in the early going, and not much going on that team. I think this Jet defense locks it up and plays a good ball game. Number 2, the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Chargers had a good outing week 1 versus the Vegas Raiders. This week, a great matchup at the Carolina Panthers that can't move the football or pretty much do anything good over the last couple seasons. I hate to say it, but Bryce Young might look like he's a bust already in the NFL, only entering his second season, but they don't really have threats. I know Deontay Johnson's been a decent receiver in his career. Adam Thielen, he's up there in age, and in the backfield, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, much pop going. So I think Los Angeles goes out there for the second week in a row and puts in a dominant performance, especially with a head coach like Harbaugh. He gets the most out of his players. Number 3, the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens last week, tough matchup, obviously, at the Kansas City Chiefs. Tough loss, losing at the end where they thought Isaiah Likely was in for a touchdown and then went under review and his toe was on the line. But this week, a great matchup versus the Vegas Raiders, led by Gardner Minshew at the quarterback position, where we know he's good for a few turnovers, good for a few sacks, and that Raider offensive line isn't all that great. I know they got some players, Devontae Adams, the impressive rookie tight end, Brock Bowers, but I don't think it's going to be enough, and I think Baltimore, the game script is going to be they're going to get off to an early start, 10, 14-point lead, and this is where this defense really takes advantage and tees off, where they're going to make Las Vegas one-dimensional, and they're going to start making plays defensively. Number 4, the San Francisco 49ers. So the 49ers D, I thought, did a pretty decent job versus the New York Jets in week 1. The Jets had a couple good drives early on in the ball game, and then the second half until garbage time, New York didn't do much. The San Francisco obviously gets to the quarterback, led by Nick Bosa, Fred Warner at the linebacker position, and just as a whole, this team's coached very well, and guys are flying all over the field making plays. So like I said, New York is a better offense in my opinion than the Minnesota Vikings, and they made the Jets offense look like a poor offense. I think going into the Dome at Minnesota versus their former backup quarterback, Sam Darnold, it's going to be a long day for him. And I think San Francisco has a dominant performance. Number 5, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers, we know they're always built on running the football and playing good defense. And this week, a good matchup at the Broncos with the rookie Bo Nix behind center for this Denver Bronco team. So Denver, it was a tough ball game for them out in Seattle. They didn't really put up much points until garbage time. And they don't really have great threats, where I think Pittsburgh, where they played a good offense on paper at the Atlanta Falcons, went in there and shut them down to only 10 points and made Kirk Cousins look like a bad quarterback. Drake London didn't do much, and the only guy who really did anything was Bijan and Kyle Pitts. I think they could go into Denver, be dominant once again on the defensive side of things, and especially versus rookie quarterbacks. This defense under Mike Tomlin's had a good track record. Number 6, the Indianapolis Colts, was a one-week streaming option and a great matchup on paper with Jordan Love now out multiple weeks with the MCL injury. Malik Willis is going to be starting at quarterback, and I don't expect much out of Malik Willis. He's more of a running quarterback, like I've said in previous videos, and also he don't know this system that well. He's only been there 3-4 weeks since getting traded from the Tennessee Titans to this Green Bay Packer team. So I think Indianapolis could get pressure on Willis. There's not going to be many threats. I know Josh Jacobs is going to get a heavy workload in this ball game, but if Indianapolis just sells out on the run and forces Willis to try to beat him, especially if they could put points on the board like we saw last week, Indianapolis did put 27 up. I think they could be a good streaming option and a good option this week at Green Bay. Number 7, the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys last week dominated the Cleveland Browns offense going in there on the opener at the dog pound. They got to the quarterback and Deshaun Watson early and often. Some nice plays in the secondary. And this Cowboy team, even without Dan Quinn, who really turned this defense around as the coordinator over the last few seasons, as long as you got Micah Parsons, Trevion Diggs, a good corner back there as well, and Eric Kendricks, who had an interception and a sack in his Cowboy debut, I think they could do some decent damage in this one versus the Saints. I know the Saints are coming off a 47-10 victory versus the Panthers, but this Cowboy defense, they've shut down a lot of good offenses in the regular season over the last couple seasons. And I think this week they got a pretty good matchup. And Derek Carr, to me, is a mid to back end quarterback. Number 8, the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks defense, pretty decent job they did versus the Denver Broncos until the Broncos scored some garbage time touchdowns in week 1. But Seattle, they get to the quarterback. They got one of the best corners in the league in Tariq Woolen back there. And they're versus the New England Patriot team that don't really have a threat at the wide receiver position. They got a collection of players, but no true number one. They got the rookie Jalen Polk. They got the Mario Douglas, Kendrick Bourne at the wide receiver position, Thornton, but not much going on. And if they could sell out and stop in this one, Ramondre Stevenson, who came off a monster game at Cincinnati, I think Seattle's defense is going to play a good part in this ball game. Number 9, the Houston Texans. Texans home opener, Sunday Night Football. I know Anthony Richardson went up and down the field versus them in week 1, but that was a division game, and Anthony Richardson, he's already a quarterback that I think could take the league by storm after missing most of last season. This week versus the Chicago Bears, number 1 pick overall, Caleb Williams coming to town with, on paper, a good offense. Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift, Rome Odunze, even though he's week to week with injury. But Caleb Williams, he looked like a deer in the headlights at times in last week's ball game versus a mediocre Titan defense, and he missed a lot of passes, and easy passes was Caleb Williams. So this week could be tough sledding for Williams once again, especially led by a D'Amico Ryans Houston Texan team where he praises defense. I think Houston, they could get off to an early lead, make Caleb Williams try to beat him. I know he was very talented and a big-time player in college football, but the NFL, it's a whole different animal, and we've seen many number 1 picks be bust. So I think Houston could go out there and have a good performance. Number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles last week, it was a shootout in Brazil between them and the Green Bay Packers, and Jaden Reed really caused damage to this Philly secondary, where they got the 2 best corners in the NFL draft and really solidified the corner position. This week, a matchup versus the Falcons, who couldn't get anything going offensively, versus the Steelers in week 1. I know they got Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod as receiving options, and obviously Pitts the tight end. But I think Philadelphia, they could cause a few turnovers on Kirk Cousins. Maybe he's still not 100% and has to get his legs under him. Remember, coming off the Achilles injury. And I think Philadelphia, Monday Night Football, they'll create a few turnovers and some sacks. Number 11, the Washington Commanders. So as a 1-week option, I like Washington this week with a great matchup versus the Giants. Daniel Jones, he's looking like one of the worst quarterbacks in all pro football. After a couple years ago, he led the New York Giants to the playoffs, and they actually won a round, beating the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. But Daniel Jones got the big contract, hasn't done much since then. Torn the ACL last year, early in the year. In week 1, he couldn't get anything going versus the Minnesota Vikings, throwing a pick 6 and just not getting anything downfield or making plays. So this week, I know Washington's defense isn't that good, but obviously head coach Dan Quinn, he's very familiar with the New York Giants, where he was the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator for many seasons. I think Washington is a 1-week streaming option and versus one of the worst offenses in the league. I think their top 12 option and the 12th and final defense, DST, I'm ranking this week is the Kansas City Chiefs. So this defense of the Kansas City Chiefs over the last couple seasons has definitely improved with Steve Spagnuolo as the defensive coordinator. And this week, not a great matchup versus Cincinnati, a team that's actually given the Chiefs some trouble over the last few seasons. Joe Burrow in this offense struggled last week. Jamar Chase, he didn't really have a training camp, so he's going to be a few steps behind, in my opinion, and he wasn't 100% with the illness. And T. Higgins missed last week's game as well, and we got to see the status on him if he's going to play in this ball game with the hamstring injury. So with all those factors in Kansas City playing great football at home, especially defensively the last few seasons, I think they could put in a top 12 performance and get some pressure on Joe Burrow, because this offensive line, I don't think he's all that great. In this running game, he's one of the bottom half running games, I think, in the league with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Kansas City Chief DST can make some plays. That's the top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking for week 2 of the fantasy football season.